Greetings, everyone. I am Dr. Wolf, and today I'd like to talk about the time I almost died. It was quite some time ago. Yeah, goodness, more than 15 years now that I think about it. Wow. But it was quite the scary experience, and recent events have very much reminded me of exactly what it was like going through that. Spending time at hospitals and hearing about my nephews going through the exact same thing that I went through. Oh, wow. So I felt really compelled to talk about it here today. What happened 15 years ago actually began around 24 years ago. I was 13 at the time, and I was practicing my trumpet. I was a trumpet player way back in the day, if you can believe that. And all of a sudden, my chest starts hurting. I wasn't sure quite what to think of it at first. I still had another 20 minutes of practicing that I needed to do that day, so I just kept going. But as I kept doing deep breaths and really pushing the sound out of my trumpet, chest pains just getting worse and worse and worse. And then I put down the trumpet and I'm really getting worried. What is going on? It's starting to hurt every time I breathe. And for a 13-year-old kid, that's really scary. It got to the point where I'm coming downstairs and I'm in tears with how much it's hurting. This is excruciatingly bad. My mother doesn't know what to do. She has no idea what this could possibly be. She tells me to sit down, and she tries to put some hot packs on my chest and hoping that it'll relax me and maybe it'll go away. And yeah, after a long while it did go away. She was worried about needing to take me to a doctor, but it did go away until a couple of days later. I was at school this time and chest pain started coming back. And at that point, yeah, we did go to a doctor. And they did check me out. But the best the doctor could come up with at that point, because chest pains were coming and going, and by the time he was examining me, it was mostly gone, he thought muscle spasms. That was the best explanation he could come up with. And so, throughout my teenage years, that's the best I could go on. Just muscle spasms. And yeah, this was a recurring thing that kept coming back completely out of the blue for no reason. Any time of day, no matter what I was doing, it could just suddenly be there. At times, it was a pain that felt like it was a large area, that felt like I needed to sit down and take very shallow breaths until it would go away. Other times it was very sudden, out of the blue, and very tiny area that felt like a knife was trying to stab its way out. But since I didn't really have anything to go on, and since the doctor had nothing to help me with, I had just learned to deal with pain. A lot of pain just random out of nowhere. I learned that if I relax, take very slow, shallow breaths, it would go away. Sometimes in as little as a minute, sometimes as much as 20 minutes. But it would always go away. Until around 15 years ago. I was in college at the time. And at that point, it would not go away. It started in the morning on a Wednesday, and I went through the standard exercises I had learned over the years, that very slow, shallow breaths. I can keep going with this. I've dealt with this pain for many years. It's okay. I can just focus on going to class, getting through my schoolwork, doing homework, and I'll be fine. The entire day, it did not go away. The pain would sometimes be less so, sometimes be more so, but it would never completely go away. And throughout the afternoon, throughout the evening, it was very slowly, very steadily getting worse. I took a long, hot shower to try and relax my muscles because, again, the only thing I had to go on was muscle spasms. And that did relax me, and pain was mostly gone by that point. And even though it was still hurting, I went to bed. I did manage to fall asleep, but around 2 in the morning, I woke up and it was so bad. It was incredibly, excruciatingly bad. The entire right side of my chest felt like it was being ripped apart from the insides. I sat up, and in that moment, I was thinking, do I need to call an ambulance? Do I need to call an ambulance? What is this? I've never had it this bad before. And I was slowly pacing through the hall of my apartment. All my roommates were asleep. I don't know if any one of them ever heard me just slowly pacing and then sitting down and pacing and then sitting down. I don't know if any of them knew how much pain I was going through that night. I didn't wake anyone up. And I was so terrified of calling an ambulance because my insurance at the time only covered emergencies. And I had no idea this was an emergency. All I knew from years before was that the best explanation there was muscle spasms. I had dealt with this maybe 100 times before now. It just never was this bad before. So I waited, I paced, I sat, I tried to do anything that would distract me. I would take very, very short, shallow breaths to minimize the pain. And when 8 a.m. rolled around, I went on campus to the doctor there. She listened with her stethoscope and then immediately said, we need to get an x-ray. And so they took me to another room to get an x-ray, and a few minutes after that, she said, we need to get you to a hospital, like right now. It turns out my lung was collapsing. There was a lot of air trapped outside in the cavity between my ribs and my lung. I had no idea. All those years, I had no idea. They got me into an ambulance. I sat in the front. I didn't need to lie down on a stretcher or anything. They took me to a local hospital. They immediately prepped me for surgery. I remember that first experience where they tried to put injections in an area around my chest to try and numb that whole area. It didn't take. And when they first put in the scalpel, I could feel every single cut, but I didn't say anything because I did not want them to stop what they were doing. I wanted them to fix this excruciating pain in my chest. And maybe it was from many years of just learning to deal with pain, but I just lied there and took it, even though the anesthetic hadn't taken in the area where it was supposed to. Oh wow, what an experience. So they stuck a tube in my chest and drained the excess air out and kept me in the hospital for a few days. They then took the tube out and observed me for a day and took another x-ray, and the lung was slowly collapsing again. So they stuck another tube in, hoping that second time's the charm. And a few days later, they took it out, took another x-ray. This time, it seemed to have taken. The lung seemed to be okay. So I went back to my apartment. I was in bad shape, but I was still functioning, and I started going back to classes. And it was only, I think, 4 days later that my chest pains came back. This time, when I went to the hospital, because I had had breakfast that morning on a Friday, they could not do the more extensive surgery they needed to do. I had to have my stomach completely empty first. So I had to wait at least 1 day. But the problem is, on Saturdays, the anesthesiologist is not at the hospital. He doesn't work on weekends. So they decided, we're just going to have to put that tube in you again and wait till Monday. That was fun. But Monday came around, and they did a more extensive surgery where they go in and kind of scar the tissue of the lung and scar the tissue of the wall of the chest cavity, and then have them kind of stick together in the hopes that they will no longer separate from that point forward. And the more extensive surgery kept me in the hospital for several days more, but the following Monday, I was ready to be released again. And it seemed to be doing okay. It only took a few days. My chest started hurting once again. It was beyond frustrating. And being in the hospital so much was just nerve-wracking. But at that point, that hospital could no longer do anything for me. They needed a specialist to help me, and there was no chest surgery specialist anywhere in that city. So, if I could not stay in my college town, I figured maybe the best choice at that point would be to go back home and seek out a hospital where my parents are, because my entire college semester is shot anyway, and from what they've explained about this next surgery that would be needed, I would be knocked out for a long time, not able to do much of anything. So my parents drove up from Utah and took me back home. They had an oxygen tank with me, and if I had any chest pain along the way, they were instructed, get to the nearest hospital immediately, no matter what. But I was okay on the way home. I made it. And that next morning, early morning, I was so completely knocked out for such an extensive surgery. By the way, I don't know if I remember explaining this, but this whole thing that happened to me, it's called spontaneous pneumothorax. It's basically when the lung starts collapsing for no discernible reason, and it appears to happen to tall, thin, young white males. No one's quite figured out why just yet. And the fact that it's happening to a couple of my nephews now too, yeah, that's apparently hereditary. It's unfortunate. At any rate, this far more extensive surgery, I had to be completely knocked out. They had to put a tube down my throat and deflate the lung entirely. so that the chest surgery specialist could open me up, split the ribs apart, cut a piece of the lung out and stitch up the hole, and then put everything back together again. I have a number of scars across my front and a 7-inch scar across my back from all the surgeries I've had during that 3-week period, I think it was, maybe 4 weeks. But I spent another whole week in the hospital after that, and then needed to spend a couple of months at home just recovering, slowly gaining my strength back. And yeah, that completely wiped me out. I was very slow moving for a little while. That first night, before I found out that this whole chest pain having to do with a lung collapsing, I came rather close to dying without ever realizing it. Having your lung collapse, it is absolutely excruciating. But as long as your other lung is still functioning, that part is not what's going to kill you. The issue is enough air gets trapped in your chest cavity, it can put pressure on the aorta, which can stop blood flow from getting out of the heart. I had no idea that I was toying with death that night. No idea. But nowadays, every time I visit a hospital, every single time, it is still nerve-wracking for me because of those very traumatic experiences from so long ago. It is something that I wanted to talk about today because I was helping someone that I care about deeply with their hospital trip, and for the sake of my nephews, one of which is currently in the hospital as of the time of this recording, for the exact same thing that I'm going through, that I did go through, I should say. He, thankfully, does not have it anywhere near as bad as I did. Because of what I went through, my family now understands exactly what these chest pains mean. They're able to catch it much, much earlier, get a better handle on it. And I am grateful for that. So very grateful for that. It is unfortunate that they have to go through this, but at least they're better prepared for it. Anyway, that's a story I wanted to share today. I hope it's something that I don't have to go through again. The right side of my chest doesn't have any more chest pain these days, but over the years, now I have chest pains on my left side. It's never reached the point where I've had to have surgery again, but I still have to deal with random bouts of feeling like a knife is trying to stab its way out, and I need to stop and take short, shallow breaths and try and relax as best I can. It's just something I've learned to deal with. Pain is a normal part of my life, but that's okay. I am grateful to be alive here today. I am grateful that I can still serve and uplift and find purpose, even if that does mean I have to deal with pain. I do want to hear whether any of you might have similar experiences that you'd feel like sharing in the comments below. It was a pretty nerve-wracking and at times even traumatic experience for me, but I am hopeful that my words can help comfort those who may someday have to go through anything that feels just as nerve-wracking or traumatic. And perhaps if you're willing to share your stories of hospital surgeries or even near-death experiences, you may help comfort those who are looking and needing that good influence in their lives. That's at least my hope. But until next time, I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.